Good morning, afternoon, evening, middle of the night, wherever you happen to be. My name is Brady Gaster, and I am coming to you from Redmond, Washington. More specifically, where I live is Sammamish, Washington, just outside of Seattle. It is a pretty nice day here today. And I hope that wherever you are today is also good, and that you have come to build inspired and ready to learn. Go ahead and share my screen here in just a minute to get started with our presentation. I hope everybody has had a moment to take a look at the prereqs slide here, and we'll just go ahead and dive right in. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Sharing my desktop. Once again, I will run the presentation, and if my moderators, Shane and Jeremy and Lucas, could let me know if we are having any issues, either audio or otherwise, feel free to let me know. Shane also has me on text message, so he can hit me up that way as well. So once again, take a look at the prereqs. This will be a shortened URL to where we're going to be doing the Learn module today. This Learn module is going to be on taking an ASP.NET application, ASP.NET Core, pardon me, application, and publishing it out to Microsoft Azure App Service, one of the best paths out there to publish your ASP.NET Core code to. We're going to talk about a little bit about the Azure Cloud environment and the portal, and some of the different resource types you'll care about as a web developer or ASP.NET Core developer. We're going to talk a little bit about the Visual Studio interface, introduce some stuff. You definitely need to have that familiarity. And we had a couple questions before the session started about the version of Visual Studio 2019. We'll be using the version of Visual Studio. We'll be using VS 2019. You could use any of the editions, Community, Professional, or Enterprise, but it needs to be 2019. And as you'll see in a moment, during one of the phases of the Learn module, we'll actually be installing what we call workloads. Talk about that later. But you'll definitely be able to update Visual Studio during this module and get all the latest and greatest bits. You need to know a little bit about programming. Hopefully, that's why we're all here today, because we're all developers at some level. And it'd be good if you had a little bit of experience with HTML, because ASP.NET Core pages are built using mixed syntax called Razor. We'll show you that a little bit later today. And the idea behind Razor is it is C# mixed in with HTML and or JavaScript if you so desire. So you need to kind of have an understanding of those basic prerequisites to be able to build a web app or to be able to build an ASP.NET Core ASP.NET Core app. Moving right along. Again, welcome to Microsoft Build. This will be the Learn Studio session, publish a web app to Azure with Visual Studio. We're going to have a lot of fun here today. Again, here is your friendly ACA link. I already have that pulled up in another browser right over here, and I'll be using multiple desktops today. So I'll be flipping between the desktops a little bit at a time. So move right along. Quick agenda of what we're going to be going through today. And again, my moderators can let me know if I'm going too fast or if we need to take a moment to ask any questions. But we're going to walk through the welcome and introductions, do the Learn module itself, which means I'll be walking through that Learn module with you today. And the Learn module is not going to take the entire time today, so I might experiment a little bit. I've got a couple notes of other things that I might want to show you if we have time today. So hopefully we can, roll through and get everything. But if you run into any snags, that's why we have moderators here. You can ask them questions. They can feed me your questions, either audio or over the back channel chat. However, we need to move forward. And then at the end, we can ask a couple questions. We can kind of move forward if you have any other things you want me to try out. Quick introductions today. This is me. I am Brady Gaster. I am your speaker today. I am a program manager on the .NET team. The things that I care about in my day-to-day work are obviously ASP.NET Core. and our past services in Azure, and try to make sure that developers have a great experience running those applications inside of Azure. Also like to do things like this, to build workshops and to work with the community to make sure that you're having fun using our tech. And I'm not one of those speakers who likes to take the entire time all to myself, and I don't mind if my moderators and my helpers speak. So I'm going to give Lucas an opportunity to introduce himself as well. He has his mic.
Hello, everyone. My name is Lucas. I'll be
maybe
helping
Lucas
you.
Come on, Mike. That's okay. And if there's something I need to do to allow somebody to speak, feel free to let me know. Jeremy Lickness is also one of our moderators. Jeremy, are you on the call?
I am on the call. Can you hear me, Brady?
Unmute. Jeremy is one of my teammates. He works on the entity framework on the .NET team with me. Shane Boyer from Florida. Shane, I know you're on the call because you were texting me earlier. Shane is a good friend of mine. We work on the .NET end-to-end vision and try to make the ASP.NET Core stuff work well. And then Adrian Martin is also one of our moderators. These folks are fantastically qualified to answer any questions that you have. And if for whatever reason they want to feed those questions to me, they can do so either via voice, or they can hit me up on the back channel chat, or they can text me, whatever works. Moving right along. Little bit of housekeeping. This session will be recorded, so we encourage that everybody just be pleasant, please. If you have any questions, please use the chat window. Please refer to the code of conduct. We want everybody to feel safe. We want everybody to feel inspired, and we definitely want everybody to feel comfortable asking questions and making comments. So please honor your code of conduct for the event today. We hope you're all enjoying it so far on day 2. Here's the code of conduct. Our mission is to empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more. This includes our gatherings and our events on any digital platforms. We seek to create a respectful, friendly, fun, and above all, inclusive experience for all of our participants, wherever you may be. We expect all digital event participants to uphold the principles of this code of conduct, which covers the main digital event and any related activities. We don't tolerate disruptive or respectful behavior, messages, images, or anything else of that nature. Any participant in any form, in any aspect of this program, here or in any other social activity, regardless of the location or the virtualness of it. Microsoft won't tolerate harassment or discrimination based on age, ancestry, color, gender, identity, or expression, national origin, physical or mental disability, religion, sexual orientation, or any other characteristic. We're fully inclusive. We encourage everyone to assist in creating a welcoming, safe environment. Please let us know if something happens either during this session or any other session or any other Microsoft event that makes you uncomfortable, and we'll do whatever we can to make sure that doesn't happen again and we take care of it. All right, all that said, go ahead and open up your browsers and let's go to this ACA link, ACA MS Learn /publish web app. And I'm going to be respectful of the variety of processing powers out there in our audience and allow everybody an opportunity during each step to kind of get caught up. So again, if you have any questions, we have some moderators available to answer those questions, or if you have comments, feel free to make them as long as they comply with the code of conduct. Okay. Let me close that tab. And let me go ahead over here and go to the actual introduction here. It looks like my session has expired on my portal, so I may need to go ahead and re-authenticate. So pardon me. Do that now. I may need my phone to off. Apologies. Did that right before the session. Yes, for now, let's say yes. My apologies for that. Okay, let's go ahead and flip back over here. I'm going to check my chat windows over here and make sure we don't have any issues. Let me actually flip over to the chat to see if we have anything that people need to ask. Looks like, sorry. Okay, so let's imagine that we're all software developers working for a ski resort. Funny story, I actually have a friend who used to do that. We're launching a new application, and we want to let users know where the trail maps are and how to purchase lift tickets and do all the things that most skiers or snowboarders like myself would want to do from their mobile phones. We want to create an ASP.NET core application that will complement and advertise the app to kind of draw people to that application. Being a Visual Studio developer, you want to use Visual Studio 2019 and all the latest and greatest tools to create, deploy, and manage your new site. Because why not? It's always great to get the new tools, especially considering you can download Community for free right now. Visual Studio and Azure App Service are a great combination for when you want to create, publish, and maintain web applications in the cloud in Azure. In this module, you're going to learn how to use the publishing features that are built right into Visual Studio so that you can create and deploy your ASP.NET applications and manage them on Azure. In this module, we're going to do a couple of basic things just to kind of get you up and running with ASP.NET Core and Azure App Service. First thing we're going to do is we're going to use the really convenient templates in ASP.NET Core to create a new Visual Studio in Visual Studio to create a new ASP.NET Core app. Then we're literally just going to right click and publish that new app to Azure App Service using Visual Studio. We're going to talk about the different things that you could do with that phase to enhance the app. Then we're going to update the web application in Visual Studio and publish the changes again. And I have some ideas on what we're going to do there. So it just depends on how much time we have. Your prereqs again, you need to be comfortable with a cloud environment, hopefully specifically with Azure. You need to have familiarity with Visual Studio, hopefully 2019 as well. Need to have familiarity with web app concepts, basic programming skills, basic HTML, and all the things we talked about already on the slide. You will need to have a local installation on your machine or log into a VM using Visual Studio 2019 16.6 or later. And it's very important to call out 16.6 because we've got some new stuff in that, new features in that release that came out just after the keynote on Tuesday. You can go download that. You can actually do that during the session today if need be. Looks like I'm signed out here as well, so I may have to do a sign in again. Go ahead and do that. My apologies. I'm not going to sign into the browser. We'll see if this works. I think I'm signed into the thing. So we'll just cruise. Okay. So the first step is that we're going to need to get some of the workloads installed into your local Visual Studio instance. So the first step is really going to go ahead and get started. So we need to configure our development environment, but before we configure that environment, I want to make sure you understand kind of the nature of what a workload is. So Visual Studio can essentially do pretty much anything. It can build apps of any size to run on almost any platform or in the cloud. A workload is essentially a pre-configured bundle of tools that we know from being in those areas. I know as a web developer, there's a series of tools I'm going to need. For example, a desktop development might have the C++ workload with all the C++ and mobile development components that you would need to get started with those individual applications or app models. For us, the Visual Studio workload that we care about, or the two workloads that we care about today, are going to be the ASP.NET and web development workloads, and also the Azure development workload. The Azure development workload is going to give you some Azure SDK components, as well as some handy tools like the Visual Studio Cloud Explorer, where you can actually individually manage any or all of the Azure assets that you happen to have running up in your Azure subscription. Obviously, the ASP.NET and web development workloads, and then the second one put on top of that would be the open source, the .NET Core workload. They're going to give you the capability to build, new .NET Core applications that you can run in Windows, on Mac, or in Linux or inside of containers. So those are really the two workloads that we'll care about and be installing today. So obviously the first step is to install those workloads. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on my start menu. I tend to be a keyboard person, so you'll probably see my mouse be relatively still for the day. And I'm just going to type Visual Studio, and what you'll see is that I have a couple of different instances of Visual Studio installed. I've got the preview, which you could download. I've got the super preview, in fact, and then I've got the public release as well. Visual Studio can be installed side by side, so if you wanted to try all the latest and greatest features out, you could actually install the stable version of VS that's got all the everything that's GA'd in public, or if you wanted to live on the edge like I do, you could actually install the preview side by side, and based on what you're doing, Visual Studio will give you the opportunity to launch either one. That's why down here you can see that I have two Visual Studio icons on my taskbar. One of them is preview and one of them is not preview. The nice thing about the installer, here it's going to tell me that it needs to, it's going to make changes to my machine, which is exactly what I intend for it to do. Pardon me. So here you'll see that the installer is going to open up. And again, as I pointed out, I've got the VS Enterprise 2019 preview, which is a much later version that you wouldn't want yet. And then there's the Visual Studio 2019 16.6 version, which, like I said, we released on Tuesday at the beginning of build. If you don't see these versions, you have the opportunity here to also update. I did all my updates prior to our meeting today, so I'm not going to be doing an update, but you should have an update here if you don't have 16.6. That is indeed the one that you're going to want. So before you do that, what we're going to be doing in here is we're actually going to click the Modify button inside of the Visual Studio installer. And then we're going to make sure that we've enabled the ASP.NET and Azure development workloads. Now, I already have those, but what I'll do, and again, I'm not going to click on my preview one. I'm going to be using the public one today. So I'm going to click Modify here. And when I click Modify, you'll see that I have a plethora of different workloads that I could install. And again, we refer to a workload as kind of all the tools that you would need to do that particular type of dev. For today, the ones we care about are going to be the Azure development workload, and you'll just want to check the box. And the subsequent one that you're going to need is going to be the web, where did it go? The ASP.NET and web development. So it should be these very first two that you're going to see up at the top inside of web and cloud. Any other workloads, though incredibly valuable, you're encouraged to install them. The more that you check on, the longer your installation process will take. So if you are new to Visual Studio or you didn't have any workloads prior to today, I would definitely encourage that for the purpose of this demonstration, let's go ahead and install the Azure and the ASP.NET and web development workloads, and then we can kind of go along. And one other thing I'll point out is that you have the capability to install them while they're downloading, or to just download them and install them later if you want to. So you can optimize the time it takes to do that process. So what I'm going to do is just close this down because I've got all the workloads that I need. Let's just leave it up so you can see what's on the screen here. But I'm going to give you the time that you need to install these workloads. And this would be a good opportunity if you have any questions to ask them of our moderators or of me. So I'm going to flip over to the chat so that I can see if there's any questions over here. The chat. Okay, nothing big. And I don't see the chat window that my wonderful moderators that I appreciate dearly see. But could you maybe get a show of hands? Are people still updating? Are they still installing? What's our status? I don't want to go ahead until I feel like the majority of the folks in the room are ready to go. Okay, my fantastic colleague, partner in crime, Shane, is letting me know that there are currently no questions. So I'm going to probably go right along. I'm going to show you a funny thing I learned. I didn't know about this button last night, but I'm going to actually take my Visual Studio instance, and I'm going to put this up here into my third desktop, which I have up here, so that I can easily go back and forth between my browser window and my Visual Studio window without having to Alt-Tab. So go ahead and click on Continue, because our next unit is going to be to actually create our new ASP.NET Core application. So I'm going to go over here and hit Continue. Shane tells me we have one question. Can we do the same thing in VS Code? And that is a fantastic question. You can indeed do the overwhelming majority of what you're going to see me do today. You can do inside of VS Code. Okay. VS Code has great support for .NET development. It has great support for all kinds of different web developers. It's used heavily by JavaScript developers, which are primarily web developers. So it is a wonderful environment. I spend roughly 4 to 5 hours a day inside of Visual Studio Code because I use it for writing specs. I use it for writing code, prototyping, all of it. There are a series of fantastic extensions that are available. Let me actually go ahead and pull this up. So I'll go to code.visualstudio.com. And what I'll do is I'll go here to extensions. And if I were to scroll down, you'll see that we have a series of categories. You can actually look at the different extensions we have categorically. And I'll click on that, and you'll see here that we have a variety of VS Code extensions for Azure. And if I were to find the one that really pertains to this session, I'll probably scroll right by it. I'm looking for app service, but there is an app service extension. Did I already go by it, Shane? There's an app service extension. I just can't find. There it is right here. Azure App Service Extension. Now, the Azure App Service Extension would give you the capability to manage your Azure App Services, and it also gives you the capability of publishing them as well. So you do have all that capability inside of the VS Code Chrome. I would say that in terms of being able to manage your applications, you're probably going to get a few more features inside of Visual Studio. But I use VS Code to publish my apps to Azure pretty frequently. It's in development environments. I have to caveat it with that. But yes, you can do some of these same things in VS Code, and there's also storage account tools and Cosmos DB tools. So yes, you can do it, but it's not Visual Studio, it's VS Code. So. And Shane says he can address out loud as well. Shane, do you have anything to add? I welcome your input, sir.
Sure. Yeah, as Brady addressed, there is the Azure App Service extension for VS Code.
I can't tell if he's talking.
Yeah, I'm talking. So
sorry.
As you.
All right. Go ahead and move right along. Shane is not saying anything to me, so I'll go ahead and move right along. Again, moderators, if you have anything to add, if there's something I need to do to allow you to speak, let me know. Okay, just noted the time, and I want to let everybody know that here in Seattle, it is roughly about the time the kids get out of bed. And with this new working environment, it would not be surprising if that door were to open and one of my coworkers come in here. So I do want to let you know in advance. So there's that. So Shane has let me know that everybody in the room can hear you except for me. So Shane, if you're talking and I just interrupted you, I apologize to you and everybody else. Cool. He says continue. Thank you, sir. Go ahead. All right. So in this exercise, we're going to create a new ASP.NET Core app. So we're just going to go ahead and get started. We're going to dive right in. So I'll step through these with you, but again, I kind of know what some of these steps are. So what I'll do just to kind of save us the screen jumps, or to kind of walk through what you'll be doing. You can do it if you want to while I'm doing it, or you can look at the screen inside of your Learn module and do it as well. But essentially what you'll be doing is you'll be creating a new ASP.NET Core project. I'm going to go ahead and cheat and copy the name of the project to my clipboard, and I'll probably just accept the default location for it. One thing I do want to point out here in this doc updated by one of our other speakers recently, you can enable HTTPS by default. Obviously, that would be advised. You can enable Docker by default if you want to, and then you can pick either a Windows or a Docker container. We won't be doing that today, but I want you to know that you can. And then there's an additional checkbox here that you may not see in my screen. This may have been a preview thing. I didn't see it the other night, at least, where you can enable Razor runtime compilation, which sort of improves your performance a little bit during deving. You can also set up some other templates if you want to, but we're going to really concentrate on this template. And this template really is our baseline web development template that gets you started with C# and Razor syntax. So to walk through that, what I'll do here is go over here, and I'm gonna do this old school. What it says in your Learn module is that you would click the launch button here. So I'll just close here, and I'll just open it up from right here. And I'm going to create a new project. And what you would do is you would go here and you would just type web to do a search. And we have quite a few web development templates. I do want to point out ASP.NET Core is where we're going to be partying today. You also have the classic templates, .NET Framework templates, as well as some of the other stuff for .NET Core. But what we care about today is ASP.NET Core Web Apps. So I'll select that first one, and then I'll click Next. And I'll paste in our name right here. Hit Create. And we will now get this particular dialog. Now I'll walk you through a little bit about what these are. The empty is literally just going to have all of your hosting and your Bootstrap stuff so that you can just get started. By Bootstrap, I don't mean the client framework. I mean just all of your middleware and your hosting stuff. Web API or Web API project. We used to call it Web API. I always expect to see that there. It's a project template for creating an ASP.NET Core web app for folks like me who really like to build REST APIs and services and backend services for their mobile apps or for the Blazor apps for that case. A typical web application is going to be your ASP.NET Core componentry, your hosting components and whatnot, along with your ASP.NET Razor page content. If you are into the MVC model, which is popular in a lot of different web development frameworks, we have a template in here for MVC type approach, where you would have controllers, which you would also have in here. And you would have views, which you would also have, you would have controllers here and here. And if you wanted to have inside of your model view controller, your views would also be Razor views. So that's kind of when you would do your MVC approach. And then if you wanted to do any kind of a SPA type app, we have Angular, React, and React Redux. Hardest word for me to say. So I'll do here is I'll click on Web Application, because we want to create an ASP.NET Core Razor Pages app. You'll see that I'm using the latest and greatest template. So I'll just hit Create here. And what we're going to do is the project's going to go ahead and get created and fire up. Okay, so here is the output of that experience for creating a brand new project. Real quickly, I'll walk you through the components of this project if you're unfamiliar to it. The first thing is I talked about how the hosting stuff all gets started up. Essentially, this program CS is going to run. It's got essentially your main method, which is the first thing that .NET's going to call when it starts up. And you'll see that it's got this use startup method, and that's basically telling the application that this startup CS file is where we're going to do things like add all the services that we need, such as Razor pages. If I had other services that I wanted to add in here, I could literally type services dot, We'll try this, and you can see that we have a lot of different middleware methods. I could add authentication, add signal R, all other kinds of stuff. If I have any additional services I need to add, I could wire them up. And this is also at the point in time where if you had any custom services, such as a iCard shuffler, to pick on Hansman's demo from the other day, that's where you would wire up all those individual services that you might need to inject into your controllers at runtime. That's a different conversation, though. Then this configure method will run, which sets everything up, tells your application where your routes are going to be, tells your application how to find your Razor pages, and basically just finishes the wire up process. If you're getting started with ASP.NET Core development, you definitely want to check our documentation at docs.microsoft.com. This file is where you'll spend a lot of time because it's kind of where you wire up all of your underpinning and do a lot of the work to get your application up and running. So Startup CS is definitely one of those important places that you would want to concentrate as you're learning about ASP.NET Core. Check my chat over here. Uh-oh. Let me actually bump my font up a little bit. Thank you, Shane. Now, again, if I go here into pages, you'll see that we have index.cs.html, error, and then we have a couple of essentially layout pages. So I'll open up the layout page, and I'm going to bump my font. Somehow it has gotten down below 100%. So there we go. Scrolling down here, what you'll see is that we have a mixture. I'm going to get rid of this window for now. You'll see that we have a mixture of HTML, and then we've got some server-side tags here where we can actually render stuff from the server. We've also got some ASP tag helpers that we can end up doing some dynamic stuff on the server. In this case, I wouldn't have to know, the hard URL. I could just say ASP page, tell it to go to index, and then it's going to find it. And I could do that for privacy as well. You have code behind these pages. In this case, if I wanted to do something during an HTTP GET on this page, I could add code here. And if I wanted to, wire up any services, I could do so here. As you can see, we're dialing in an iLogger at construction, so that if you wanted to log stuff to the trace, later on, if we get a chance, we'll use application insights so that you can look at the telemetry for your site, and that's when things like iLogger would become a lot more valuable, because then you can actually see your traces inside of the Azure portal. But with that said, here we just have a couple different options of things we can do after we've got our brand new ASP.NET Core application. The last thing I'll point out here is that inside of this www root, or next to last thing, penultimate thing, is that inside of this www root folder, this is where you're going to have all of your static assets. So if you have static files like CSS files or local JS files that you're going to be using, or if you've pulled in things like Bootstrap or jQuery, those would probably live in your lib folder. It's up to you to move those things around, but the point is that if you wanted to reference any of these static files, as we've done here inside of layout, you would literally just use the tilde, and it starts at root, and then you go from there, and that's everything beneath the www root folder. So you can kind of think of www root folder as your root. Oops. Okay, sorry. So now we're back on the Learn module here. If you've already got your new ASP.NET Core app, the next thing you'd want to do would be to build and test on your local machine. I'm going to pause here real quick, and I'm going to check my my personal chat window over there, and see if anybody has any questions. But if you have any questions, if you ran into any snags on that file, new project creation experience, if things don't look the way they look on my screen, this is an opportunity for you to ping one of our moderators. I'll wait a few minutes, and Shane, I'm going to wait until you tell me that I can start talking again this time. Okay, Shane's giving me the green light. So we're just going to move right along. Hope everybody's enjoying what we're doing so far. Hope you're getting excited about what comes next. What comes next is we get to F5. We get to, start to run our application. So what I'll do here is I'll show you that what we're going to do is we're literally going to hit F5. or if you wanted to control F5, the way many of us do when we're constantly updating our pages and seeing what things happen, that would start without the debugger. What's going to happen is Visual Studio is going to start up IIS Express, and it's going to load up that application inside of the browser. So I will control F4 this file, and I'm going to leave this open. You can see right here that I'll go to IIS Express. And the last file that I'll point out here, I'm going to close all of these. The last file that I want to point out here is if you ever get confused about what port you're on, or you don't like what port you're on by default, because we pick one at random for you, you can actually go into launch settings.json. And you can edit that stuff yourself. If you want to only run on Kestrel, which is the ASP.NET Core built-in web server, you could do something like take out this IIS settings node, and then the only profile that you would ever run would be inside of the ASP.NET Core Kestrel server. I tend to run on a Mac or on Linux, and whenever I get these files, sometimes I'll remove these just because my Windows teammates love it when they get these files and they start running on what looks like a Kestrel port. It's a fun practical joke to play on Shane and Jeremy. Give them an opportunity to rib me. So, but I want to point out that this is where you could customize your port if you need to. I'm not going to do that. And again, when we talk about running it on IIS Express or running it on Kestrel, you do have that opportunity here. So I could actually pick IIS Express is where I want it to run, which is what I'll do today. Or if I wanted to run it on side of Kestrel, or for whatever reason I'm debugging a Kestrel specific thing, I could actually run it in usually what's called the project name. I'll leave it as IIS Express for now. And you'll see that as soon as I hit F5, what'll happen is it'll spin up that app, and it will open the app up in a web browser. Now, in the back here, you'll see that Visual Studio is still running, and I have access to all the diagnostic tools. And if I were to set a breakpoint, why not? Let's do that. I'll set a breakpoint inside of index.cs.html, and I'll just do it right here inside of our get. And I'll flip back, and when I refresh, you'll see that we stop on that breakpoint. I can just do a continue. Nothing too fancy in our getting started part. But the next thing that I would do is I would show you that if I wanted to, for instance, change the welcome message that's on index.chtml, I could say welcome to build here. And then as soon as I hit F5 or I hit my debug button, you'll see that we've actually made a change here. And there we go. It's as simple as that. We also have tools that would enable you to be able to do that more quickly. We have some tools that will link Visual Studio and your running app. Or if you wanted to use from the command line, you could use what's called .NET Watch. .NET Watch would essentially watch any Razor or CS file, and whenever you make a change to it, it'll automatically recompile everything on the fly, and you get an update. That's handy if you could go, if I CD out to this directory and I just type .NET Watch, it'll start watching it, and then every time I make a change, it'll change. Show you that real quick, just in case that's something of interest to folks. Actually do this. Open up my terminal here. Is that right? CD source, repos, Alpine, ski house. And I will CD in Alpine ski house one more time. And right here, I could just say, I'll clear my screen. I'll just do a dot and see if .NET Watch is installed. This is unrehearsed. It's fine. So you'll see here that .NET Watch is started. So, and it started on Kestrel, so it's a different port number. Now remember when I pointed out the launch settings file, this is our port when we're running on top of IIS Express. But if I happen to be running on top of Kestrel, you can see that my ports are 5000 on the HTTP port and 5001 on the secure port. So I'm going to copy that out right now and open up a browser, and I'll paste this in. And you'll see that I've got my welcome to build message, and I want to leave this running. But now what I'll do is I'll come over here and I'll close this file, and I'll say 2020. And really quickly, I'm going to save and then Alt Tab back. And you'll see that the moment I Alt Tab back to that terminal window, .NET Watch sees that I changed this CS HTML file, it has gone ahead and recompiled and restarted Kestrel. And now when I hit F5, we have an update. So that's just a handy little trick if you don't want to continually hit F5. If you know you're not actually going to need to step through code, you're just frequently making changes, that might be one trick that you could use. But I do want to point out that if you do that and then you hit F5, there's a pretty good possibility that you might already be using that port. So that's just something to think about. You might get a port conflict, but yeah. So with that said, I want to flip back over here and really quickly go back over to our thing here, our Learn module here. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop there again, just to make sure everybody had a pretty clean F5 experience, that you went in and you made a change to your file, then you F5'd again, and that everything worked. If you did something else, it might not have worked. I don't remember if I explicitly had to install anything else to make all the later stuff work in that impromptu demo, but again, I'll give you an opportunity to ask questions about what you saw here. Going back to the earlier question, really good question on VS Code, by the way. Going back to that question, what you saw me do here, you could also do inside of Visual Studio Code. You could F5, you got a debug window, you've got locals and everything else that you need inside of VS Code. So the same experience that you saw me do today inside of Visual Studio would be available to you inside of VS Code from a debugging perspective. But with that said, just in case anybody ran into any issues, I'm going to give the room a moment and our global room a moment and see if you have any questions. Let's see what's up. The difference between MVC and Blazor server. That's a large question. I'll try, and then I'll see if Shane or Jeremy want to try better. The difference between MVC definitely was earlier. We've had MVC since the early days of ASP.NET, even before ASP.NET Core. Blazor Server is definitely later. So where MVC essentially works is you've got your models. So you might have product.cs, you might have customer.cs, et cetera, et cetera. Those are your models, and in the V and the C parts, you would have a controller, and your controller would essentially hoist those models out of your database, and they would feed them into your view. So the C part of that, the controller, is really the only thing that I would say is more akin to the Blazor server side. On the Blazor server side, what we're doing is we are instantiating essentially what's called a SignalR hub. My thing that I like to PM. SignalR is our real-time framework. It gives you the capability to do real-time messaging or real-time streaming between a client and a server. So you could have bidirectional communication without using gRPC, just using HTTP1. So I do want to point that out. The major difference I would say is that in Blazor Server, you have a constant connection back to the server. And whenever something happens on the server, it basically fires an event, and that event is you need to update UI, and this is the UI that you need to update, and it just pushes it down to the client versus the client needing to make a request. So that's kind of a quick dive into it. Shane and or Jeremy or any of the other wonderful moderators, do you have anything to add there?
Sure.
Give you the floor.
Yeah, this is Jeremy. I will add that a huge difference of Blazor Server and MVC is that Blazor Server is specifically a single page application framework. So what you build, even though it's running as if on the server, that SignalR connection that Brady talked about runs on the client, and it allows you to build experiences that don't involve entire page refreshes and round trips to the server. So you can code as if you're coding locally, so it has the feel of a local sort of desktop style application, but it's projected into the browser and provides a single page application experience.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thanks so much for that. Any other questions, comments, snide remarks, anything? Thanks. Thanks a lot. All right. Moving right along, what we're going to do next is we're going to explore the Azure App Service. And of course, as usual, I'm going to go off script just a little bit. Now, the Learn module here is going to walk through a couple of the different, what we call when we speak of Azure, resource types. So inside of Azure, everything is a resource. You could have an app service, which is what we'll be talking about today, could be a resource. You might have a storage account that could be a totally different resource, et cetera, et cetera. You know, all of these individual things are different, you know, resources, and each one of them has their own ID, their own URL, their own place in the portal, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The primary area that we're going to be talking about today inside of Azure is going to be one of the PaaS areas called Azure App Service. And we're going to look at what those different components are. So App Service, or as we used to call it the old days, it was called Web Apps because it was just for web apps. Today it can do a lot more than just web apps. It is a PaaS service for hosting web applications, REST APIs, and backend services. You can host .NET Framework, .NET Core, Classic ASP, Java, Ruby, Node, PHP, and Python. And if you start looking at things like functions, you can do things with PowerShell and a whole host of other technologies as well. It's ideal for most web applications, particularly if you don't really need tight control over the hosting infrastructure. And you can get pretty low level with the hosting infrastructure with the different tools that the team has built out over the years. Now that's your service. That's your actual where your code runs. There's also a concept called an app service plan. What I'm going to do at this point is instead of kind of through this, I'm going to, kind of flip over to my portal and kind of walk you through what this looks like in my personal portal. So over here, you'll see this concept of a resource group. So, I talked about how everything in Azure has different resources, or everything in Azure has different resources. What we like to do is we like to give you the ability to group those resources logically. There's a couple different reasons for that. Azure has a worldwide network of data centers. The data center that I typically use is the one in the West US region. We have one in the East US, a couple others, Central, South Central, et cetera, et cetera. So we have regions all over the globe. The idea behind a resource group is you could kind of target one of those regions. So I could create a resource group and theoretically, ideally, put all the different resources into the same resource group that's sort of related to that region. Excuse me, the region that's related to that resource group. It's not a requirement, but it is kind of an optional, an ideal setup. And the reason it's ideal is let's consider the parts here. My app service plan is essentially my server rack, if you will. It's like the machine, the VM on which my code is actually going to run. I don't want to say container, but the logical container, not a Docker container, but the container in which my code actually executes where it's hosted, that's my app service. I can have multiple app services on one app service plan, just the same way I could have multiple websites on one IaaS server. So that's kind of your idea. An app service plan is kind of where it runs, your server rack, your VM, etc. And then the app service is really your logical unit of work, the thing about which you care. There are also sort of sidecar services that you can add along to it, such as in my case here, I've got application insights. I'll be using application insights if we have time to actually talk about how you can look at telemetry, site traffic, errors, and traces, and whatever else you want to see how your site's performing. In the portal, you have the capability of customizing your portal. So what I've done here is I've actually taken this resource group and I've taken every one of these resources and put them all right here. So I have quick access to them. You don't have to do that. I typically tend to be inside of a resource group view. But essentially what I did was to create a new resource group, and then I created an app service plan. Then I created an app service in that app service plan. I put my code into that app service, and then I can begin to add other services on as I go. Later on, if we have time, I'll create a storage account, and then you can do something like put all those static files. You could put those into the storage account, and you can put a content delivery network, a CDN, on top of it, and increase your site's performance while decreasing your site's server load. So you can do all kinds of crazy stuff with the various myriad of services that you have inside of Azure. But I like to look at it visually rather than reading it on a page. Does a great job of reading, but I like to look at it. So resource group, app service plan. Your app service plan can have multiple apps on it. And an app service can be a web app, a mobile app, a function app, whatever you want. And then we have all kinds of different capabilities that we can do on those and tools that we can use inside and outside of the portal. We even have a CLI, but that's a different learn module. One other thing to talk about with our app service plans is that you have this capability of scaling out or scaling up. Show you what that would look like. So in this particular app service plan, I think I have set it up as a basic plan. Yes, it's a basic plan. And you can see that my basic plan is roughly $50 a month. I could go down into a shared infrastructure for $9 a month, and I'm going to lose a couple of features. It's probably not going to be on as strong of a machine. You can see here that in the shared, I'm going to have 240 minutes a day of compute time and 1 GB memory. Over here in the free shared area, I'm only going to have 60 minutes a day of compute, but I'm not going to have to pay for it. And what you'll see at the top is that we group these by kind of what you would imagine your scenario is going to be. So for dev test, it's really going to be free, shared, or your basic type plan. In these areas, you're going to be on an app service plan kind of sitting next to somebody else. So if for whatever reason, it's a busy day, you are in a shared plan. With that comes some applications. So that's something to think about. Once you get into your production area and you want to make sure that your site is only, you're not only, not in a shared environment, but that you have the capability to scale, however you need to, you can go into these production workloads, and that's what you can get into standard or higher machines, premium machines. And you can see here that the price does go up, but the number of features that you would get also goes up. When you get into these production areas, you have capabilities like staging slots. So you could actually have one app service that have a dev slot, a staging slot, Shane's slot, mine, and Jeremy's. So you can basically have one web app that you can publish to either from a development environment or from a CI/CD environment. I could set up each one of these slots so that they individually look at specific Git branches of a particular repository, and whenever I push to branch A or branch B, slot A or slot B will get updated dynamically. So you have a total different, myriad of capabilities when it comes to the app hosting plan that you can just take a look at. And again, all of our documentation goes through all this in great detail, and we make recommendations to you and our architecture centers and our docs on which one you would need based on your scenario. As always, I want to give Jeremy and Shane and my other moderators an opportunity to say anything else about the concept of an app service plan or virtual or shared, or to take any questions from folks if we have any at this time. And Shane, I'll wait for you. Shane says we're all good, so I'll go ahead and go back to this. Now, selecting a region. When you create an app service plan, you need to define the region or location where it's going to be hosted. So for me, like you saw in mine, I actually picked West US. If it's a web application, chances are you probably can't guess where all of your users are going to come from unless that web application is a secure web application that can only be accessed by people that are in Seattle. And then in that case, you'd probably want to pick West US. If you are unsure of which region you want to go to, or that you're going to have worldwide distribution for your app and you're going to have people looking at your app from all over the globe, then you're going to want to use something like Traffic Manager, where you can actually create numerous instances of your web app. You can put Traffic Manager in front of it. Traffic Manager will figure out, very similarly to the way a CDN would figure out kind of the origin, IP address, where are you coming from, and dynamically route to the most appropriate spot. So what that does is that mitigates geo load time, if you will. Pricing and reliability levels, definitely an important consideration. When you're in shared compute, there's two base tiers. They're going to run on the same Azure VM as other app service apps, like I talked about earlier. I might be on an app service VM that has 2 or 3 different customers on it because I'm in that shared environment. Free and shared plans are best for small scale personal projects, prototypes, those kinds of things. I use them all the time. I constantly create and delete free web apps with very odd names, or dynamically generated names, just to test out code. If there's one thing I can say about, right-click deployment, it's you really want to be careful when you do it. I would never encourage somebody to right-click deploy to production. But when you're developing quickly, as people tend to do in the cloud, it's really great to be able to deploy to a free site, because you don't have to worry, you know, if somebody hits it, somebody guesses the URL, am I going to have a spike in performance? Am I going to have a spike in usage? You might, but then it's going to shut off. That's kind of the idea of a free site. So there's that. Once you get into dedicated compute with the basic standard premium and premium V2 plans, one thing to point out is that the app I'm running, and I think my personal blog, are actually running basic. So they're really inexpensive options that are dedicated compute. So you're not running with anyone else. That is completely your app service plan and your app services on it, only your stuff. But it's, you know, you can go up pretty high at that point, and then you can get into the concept of being able to scale out, which I didn't show you in the portal either. We go and do that. So if I were to go to my app service plan here, now you saw that, whoops, no, it's my, go to this guy here. If I go to my app service plan, you saw what I did earlier was I went to scale out, and scale out is when scale up. Scale up is when I can go down to a shared plan or up to a production plan. As I've done here, I've gone to the basic plan, but you can also scale out. So you can scale horizontally, and that's pretty easy too. I can go here and I can just say, well, I need 3 instances. And then when you get into premium, you can go higher than that if you want to. And what this does is this, instead of your web application running on one server, would be running on 2 or 3 or however many. And we do that for you just by giving you a slider. You don't have to go to procurement and order a server and set it up and all that. You literally just slide the slider out and scale out. So just to point that out. And when you're in the dedicated plans, such as basic, standard, premium, and premium V2, one thing that's important to note is you can scale out further. So if you're in basic and you can only go to 3, when you're in standard, you can go to more than 10. So you definitely have more out that you can go. So just put that out there. And then we have another tier called isolated, and you'll hear people talk about things like app service plan environments. That's when you need total control of not only your app service and the code running in your app service and your app service plan, but when you want to do something like set up a virtual network back to the office, or you want to do something more extreme, that's when isolated would be good for you. And that's going to run on your own dedicated Azure VM and your own dedicated virtual network. You'd want that whenever you've got a really intense application that's highly resource intensive, that's making a lot of different resource calls. You need to scale like crazy. You know you're going to have a big sale coming up. Those kinds of things are great when you're in an isolated environment, because you definitely have a lot more control over things. So just to point that out. And then again, we talked about resource groups. Resource groups, pardon me, are not a physical thing. They're more of a conceptual concept. You know, if I put an app service, a storage account, a CDN all into one resource group, when I'm done with it, when I'm done with my prototype, or I'm done, you know, showing it to my client or my customer, I can just delete the resource group, and everything in that resource group goes bye-bye with it. So that's extremely convenient when you're developing quickly. So I do want to point that out. Delete the resource group, everything in it's gone. So any questions about that topology at this point, as we talked about shared, dedicated, et cetera, isolated, and resource group concept? Anybody have any questions, comments, or need a break? Shane, I will again wait for you, sir. Thank you, sir. Oh, cool. Okay. So this is the fun part. This is where we actually get to do some fun stuff. So at this point, we are going to kind of get started. Now, the wonderful team at learnmicrosoft.com has this concept of a sandbox, and that's great because in the past when we've done these things, if we wanted to do something simple and somebody had to sign up for an Azure subscription, that you know would not always be an easy act. You got to fill out the form, et cetera, and we don't want you to get blocked by those things. So what we've got is this wonderful concept called activating your sandbox. So as long as you're logged in, which I am, I'll click that Activate Sandbox button, and it's going to go out and use the power of Azure to dynamically create me a new, essentially a new subscription, and some just kind of get me started so that I can start party inside of my new Azure subscription right here and publish some stuff to it. Now, in these concierge subscriptions, you're not going to have the capability to do every single thing. You won't be able to create 14, Kubernetes clusters. And I do believe you're only allowed the capability of using free or limited, like limited price options. So some of those capabilities that we talked about, like scaling out horizontally, might not be capable whenever you're creating these things, but you can. Oh, sorry about that. Seems like I need to zoom my browser. Oh, that's not what I want to do. Let me do this. Control plus. There we go. Hopefully that's better. Thank you, Shane. Is this any better for folks? Cool. Thank you, sir. Again, when you create one of these sandboxes, please note that you'll only have it for around 4 hours. So that's just something to note. You won't have all the time in the world, but we'll definitely have enough time to get through what we want to do in here today, I believe. So what we would do at this point is we would literally right-click our new project and we would publish it up to our Azure subscription. So I will flip over here. And hopefully I will see my concierge subscription. So I'll right click here and let me close that. I've already got the publish thing open, but what you would see is you would go here, right click and go to publish. And at this point, this dialog would open up. Now we give you a lot of different capabilities, a lot of different publish targets. The one we care about today is going to be Azure. So I'll just click on Azure. And like we mentioned, we've got capabilities for you to deploy to Windows, to Linux, or if you wanted to use app service on containers, you could do that. Today, we're going to go with Windows for no apparent reason. So I'll hit next here and allow this to spin. And there's my concierge subscription. That is the one that I just created in my Learn module. You might see some spinning beyond it needing to spin. And what you'll see here is this Create New App Service button. So what I'll do here is I'll click on that and you'll get this dialog that will pop open, and I'm just going to leave the name as it is. And you'll see that I've got, my Azure Quick Starts resource group. I'm not going to pick that. I'm actually in the wrong sub. So I will select my concierge subscription here, and it's going to dynamically pick your resource group, and it's going to dynamically pick your hosting plan. One thing I noticed is you'll see here that we've got West US and South Central. What I would do is I would just pick one region. So I'll do that right now. Actually going to go here, and you'll also need to do free, or I think free is the only one that'll work. So I'm going to go here, and instead of the S1, which is our standard, I'm going to click free. And again, the way I got to that was clicking the new button right here on the app service plan. And I'll click on OK, just accept the defaults. Oop, I didn't change the region. Oops, that's the most important part. I'll go down here and I will select West US and free. So there's those two. Main thing here to point out is just we want to make sure that these are both in the same region. The name, you can customize the name if you want to. I'll flip over to my chat here and see if everybody's all right on that screen. Okay. Shane's not texting, so I'll presume we're good. And I'll click on Create here. You'll see that it will go out and create my resource group and my hosting plan or app service plan. This is a good time for any questions if people have any. Oh, and here we have, you'll see that we've already created the app service. And again, got my subscription, my resource group that I've selected, and I have gotten this, and I will just right here, I will click finish. And what will happen is you will see this dialog, And this is actually the kind of your service dependencies area, where if we wanted to add any dependencies like application insights or a SQL Server database, we'd click add and do that here. But we can also see a link where we could manage in the Azure portal. And if we wanted to edit any settings, we can actually do that as here as well. So what I'll do is I'm just going to hit publish, because we are, pretty much, I'm ready to go, ready to publish my application. At this point, it will begin to do the publish dance. It will package up all my code, compile it into DLLs, and push everything out to Azure for me. And then once that happens, it'll actually open up in my browser. You can see right here. There we go. So we're welcome to Build 2020. You can see that we've already deployed our application, and we are pretty much up and running. If you wanted to do something like add some sort of a dependency, like in this case, application insights, I'll show you a great way that you can do that. You don't even have to go to the portal or do any wire up. What I can do here is just click add. You'll see that we have a lot of different services in Azure that you can actually depend on, from application insights, which is going to be able to monitor your web app, to Azure storage, which is going to give you the capability to store files or store data, or set up a CDN, on and on and on. Cosmos DB or SQL Server database if you want to store your data. What I'll do here is I'll just select Azure Application Insights and click Next. And I don't have any instances of the App Insights service, so I'll just click Create a New one. Again, I'm going to put it into West. That's fine. Resource Group, West US. I'll click Create here and click Next. And it's going to say, you need to configure this. You want to configure this inside of your Azure App Settings? Absolutely do. That would be something that we can figure out in the actual PaaS fabric and in our local file. So I'll click Next, and look what we're going to do. We're going to configure your local settings file over here. We're going to configure your code inside of your startup CS, and we're going to add all the NuGet packages that you would need to be able to party on the Application Insights SDK. So go ahead and do that, and we'll hit close, and you'll see that I've already configured it. And if I were to open up Startup CS, you'll see that we've already wired up Startup CS with the Application Insights telemetry, so you don't even have to do any coding yourself. We've already done all that for you. It's all available in 16.6, and now I can just do another publish exercise here. And flip back over. You can see that now the site is still going to load up. We're not going to see anything different yet because of the fact that Application Insights is a resource. But if I were to go here and say Manage in Azure Portal, what that'll do is that'll deep link me directly to that Azure App Service instance where I could actually make changes to it if I wanted to. And I've got this Application Insights button right here if I wanted to actually click and go directly into my Application Insights. And I can go to my Application Insights data. And we might not see the data here for a couple seconds because it takes a minute for the data to cache up. But if I were to click around and give us a few extra requests, after a couple minutes, you would begin to see data showing up inside of the Azure Application Insights telemetry window right over here, and you could drill in and look at each one in more detail if you wanted to. So that's kind of the publishing experience. So done pretty much all that. We've published it. We've gone to the URL that we see in the dialog. We've talked about adding an Application Insights dependency, which isn't even in here. And we're pretty much at the end of this unit. Our next unit would really be to kind of walk, go walking through the code and doing a little bit more stuff. One thing I wanted to show you in here today was flip over and I'll show you inside of that Startup CS. We have this concept of an I configuration, which pretty much every web application gets, and this I configuration service is really sort of around all the time. So if you ever wanted to configure your application, you could make a call to that I configuration. You could get config out of either the app settings file, or if you were to use Azure App Configuration later on, you could do that. So what I could do here is I could literally go in and I could type in welcome, and I could give this a value hello from Azure. You see that? I've already got my welcome message. What I can do inside of start of my index CS.html is I could literally paste in right here a line of code that would give me this configuration object in my page. And now what I can do is I can, instead of having a hard-coded message, I could just say configuration. It's going to do it for me. Oh, let me get my variable here. I could just paste it in from here. I'm just going to test this out to make sure it does what I think it will do. If I've got a demo error here, my apologies. What I can do at this point is I can literally configure my application however I want to using app settings JSON. So there's hello from Azure. But what's nice is I'll go ahead and one more time, I'll go out here and I'll publish this application. But before I do, what I want to do is I want to go here and say manage Azure App Service settings. And I've got a couple in there, but I want to make a new one called welcome message. And please enjoy your build week and stay safe. Oh, I don't know how to type. Stay safe. And now I'll click OK. And I can now republish my app. And what we've done is we've actually wired up a configurable setting inside of our Azure App Service or inside of my ASP.NET Core code. And if I wanted to make a change to it, obviously I can do it inside of Visual Studio. I wouldn't have to go to the portal. But you can see here, there's our message that we've already configured. If I wanted to reconfigure that, I could do so right here. But if I wanted to do that in the portal, just so you know how to, I want to make sure you are aware of these settings. If I were to go to my Azure App Service that I've deployed here and then go over here to configuration, you'll see that we've got all of these configurations right here. So if I wanted to, I could actually click one of these and go here to edit. I could do this and say, thanks for coming out today. And if I wanted to, I could make these deployment slot settings. So if I had different slots, I might want dev to have one message. I might want production to have another message. So I'll just go ahead and save that right there in the portal. And I will go over to my site and I will refresh my site. And we should see a new message right here in the browser. Thanks for coming out today. I want to thank you all for coming out today. It's always more fun to be in person, but this isn't so bad. I want to thank my moderators today, your moderators today. They've been super helpful. We definitely have a few more minutes for Q&A. Not too much, but if anybody has any last minute questions, you've got us here. Feel free to hit us up. And I'll look over at my text message to see if Shane has any messages for me coming in. Again, thank you all so much. We hope you stay safe out there. Questions? .NET Watch for production. You mean like watching it? And don't do that. .NET Watch is really for development. It's really for your development machine. Okay, don't do that. Cool. Flip over here and stop sharing now. Cool. I don't see any other questions. Workshop on containers. We do have a workshop on containers that we've been working on. I would encourage you to go out and look at Learn. Learn has a walkthrough of creating a .NET Core application and Dockerizing it and getting it running up in the cloud. And we have some upcoming workshops, some upcoming Learn modules that are going to go a little bit deeper. There are some on Learn around publishing in containers and doing things with containers and doing things with microservices and going further than that. I would definitely encourage you to go look at the Learn modules, do a search for containers. You will find some good resources out there. And I know Shane has a plethora of other good resources he could share as well. Cool. I want to thank everybody. I think we are at time. This worked out well, timing-wise. Thank you all so much for coming out today. I hope you have a lovely, safe, and great build and beyond.